You have cancer. 3 words that change a life forever. We would like to offer another 3 words. Be an overcomer. Welcome to the 1% Podcast, where our conversations with other cancer warriors, survivors, and caregivers allows us to give you that extra boost you need to face your challenge head on, live life from a new perspective, and forge a path that keeps you moving free and clear. Now, welcome your host and cancer survivor, Truett Taylor.
Welcome to today's episode of the 1% Podcast, the show where we interview young adults who are battling or surviving an unexpected cancer diagnosis. You are not alone, and I promise, by consuming today's content, your soul will be fed with the hope, courage, and inspiration you need to keep fighting for today. I'm excited to be on your journey with you today. If you haven't done so already, be sure to head over to 1%podcast.com to sign up for our email list to see the latest news and updates for all our guests on the show. You can also check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1% Podcast. If you want to join in on some of our discussions, please join our Facebook group, the 1% Podcast. To contact me directly for content, questions, or booking events, you can email me at info@1%podcast.com. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 52 of the 1% Podcast. It's Truett Taylor here, bringing you another powerful episode with Miss Sara Live Free Warrior today. Before we get into the interview, let's talk a little bit about some things that have happened over the past week for me. I had a great opportunity to go to Nashville to visit my good friend, Miss Fabi Powell. Last Tuesday, I went up to her event for the Josh Powell Foundation. Had an awesome opportunity to speak to a lot of different people there, met some amazing people. 2 future guests that are going to be on the show that came up to me and started talking once I had a chance to speak to everyone and shared their story and how cancer's impacted their life and people in their family's life. And guys, I cannot wait to bring you those interviews in the next couple of weeks. Just the conversations that we have. You know, when you have the opportunity to get up in front of a bunch of people and tell your story and tell the impact cancer's had on your life, I highly encourage you to do that, because I didn't even know anybody in the crowd except for my friend Fabi. And I had 2 total strangers come up and start talking to me afterwards and just tell me their journey with cancer and how everything I was saying really hit home with them. And guys, we need to tell our story more, and we need to connect with more people. So I'd love for you guys to reach out to me if you have any kind of questions, or if you want to share your story on the podcast, please reach out to me. I'd love to meet you or talk to you and see exactly what you want to tell and share, and how you want to share your story. I love being able to do that. It's just a big passion of mine to be able to share other people's stories. There's so much healing in storytelling. There's so much healing in music. And, you know, I learned so many different things from meeting the people that I met last week in Nashville. So I'm excited to bring you that. Today, man, you guys are in for a treat. So Sara and I were connected through a mutual friend, and the minute I started talking to Sara, I knew she and I had just a tremendous amount of things in common, from everything from being an entrepreneur, how we live our lives cancer-free, the whole mind, body, spirit thing that we talk about. Guys, I'm so impressed with the way she lives her life, and I'm impressed with all of her content as well, too. That was one of the main things that really kind of drew me to her. Sara posts tons of content every day, and it's all positive. And, you know, she has different things in her book, Living Cancer Free, that you guys should definitely check out. I'm going to post links to that in all the show notes here. But, gosh, she's such an amazing person, and the way she lives, like, she truly lives what she preaches. And I think that's how you know someone is really authentic. It's really easy to listen to someone, you know, get you pumped up and going, but for someone to actually live out their message the way Sara does is just so authentic and so raw and so truthful, and just such an inspiration to me. So during our interview today, we talk about some really deep stuff. She gets to share the good, the bad, and the ugly of her life. Guys, we talk about everything from her eating disorder to, you know, the different ups and downs she had in relationships, how she, you know, got to the point where she is now, and the life that she lives, and just loving herself. I think this episode is going to touch a lot of people. I'd love to hear your feedback. I'd love for you to send Sara a DM and just let her know what you thought about the show, how much you appreciated her message. I'm sure she'd love to hear that as well, too. So you guys enjoy my interview with Sara. Let me know your feedback. and we'll see you next week for episode number 53. Here's Sara. Hi, Sara. Welcome to the 1% Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing. Thank you for having me here.
Awesome. Now, Sara, you're an author, speaker, and a content creator, and you have a website called livefreewarrior.com. We have a mutual connection, Mr. Josh Perry. He connected me with you. Wonderful, wonderful guy. I really enjoy every conversation that I have with him. So if he recommended somebody, they've got to be great to talk to. So I'm excited to have you on our show.
He's quite an inspiration for sure. And I've always loved to share the message and connect with as many individuals that we all have had experiences with in our lives. And it's always an honor to share.
I love it. Well, I'm excited to really dig into your story today. Tell people about who you are, what you're about, your past, your present, your future, all the things that you have coming up for everyone. Really exciting. I love your message. I love the way you deliver your message. It's very hopeful. It's very promising. It's very inspirational. And it's exactly what you need to hear, no matter what point or what in the life cycle of our life that we are in. Hearing your message, I think, can definitely get people to the next level. So I'm excited to share all that with everyone today. Why don't you start off by telling everyone a little bit about who you are and why you feel like it's important for you to share your story?
Absolutely. I'll start from the top. So my name is Sara. I'm better known as Live Free Warrior throughout the entire social media and online world. Part of the warrior comes from my previous battles in my life that we need to sometimes fight for health, fight for what we want. And at the same time, also learn to balance strength and love at the same time. The previous history of me, and I share all the details in my book, Living Cancer Free. There's been a lot of ups and downs in my life, and I truly believe that you can judge a book by its cover, but you really got to read the pages in between. And that's where you learn a lot about somebody, and that nobody has an easy path, and how many lessons we can learn along the way. And I happen to be a fortunate person who can share some of those lessons with others. So I'm now based in Miami, but as we talked about, I'm from New England, so much colder up in that direction that I see. I actually just had a text with my mom, and she said, "We're skiing up in Maine." I was like, "Oh," and I was just by the pool. So I found really my home here in Miami. And it's been an evolution from corporate America to being a yoga instructor and health coach, to then changing careers again and now doing more speaking events, being an author, and doing content creation. So every day I'm filming and editing and sharing ways to live your healthiest and best based on passion, fitness, nutrition, and travel, of course.
Yeah, well, you're a phenomenal storyteller, so I'm sure people are getting just tons of value from all your content. Let's talk a little bit about your life, because you were diagnosed when you were 19 years old with Hodgkin's lymphoma. Let's talk a little bit about how you grew up. I always like to ask people, like, what was their life like before they were diagnosed with cancer? Because there's always moments in your previous cancer life that tell a little bit about how you dealt with cancer, and then the post side of it. Tell us about how you grew up in the Northeast area, and what was your life like prior to being diagnosed?
I had a great childhood. I played a lot. I have two wonderful parents, a younger brother. Like, it was really, if you open up a storybook, it's the perfect family, really. It's the one boy, one girl, two parents together in love. We grew up in a beautiful neighborhood, supported for everything. A lot of the inner turmoil I had as a child, it was brought upon by myself. Right around the age of 14, when I really started to struggle with who I am and who I was. That's when there started to be almost like a plate shift, and I separated a lot of my mind from my body, and the body started to become an enemy in a lot of ways. I started to act on an eating disorder, anorexia and bulimia, as a way to cope with the emotions that I at 14, 15, 16 did not know how to deal with in any way whatsoever. I was going through at that age, of course, the struggles of any teenager, but your sexuality, your Am I fitting in? Am I cool enough? The stresses of school. Where am I going in my life? It's a lot of salud. It's a lot of different overlaps of stresses that I was struggling with. And that was the precursor before cancer came along. I was recently giving an author talk, and someone someone who was listening and part of the audience said, "What stresses does someone have at the age of 15?" I was like, there's a lot. There's really a lot. And if I can only share. So I started to tell him, and it opened his eyes, and he was like, okay, yes, that really opens my eyes a lot. Yeah. And when we don't know how to deal with that and we take it upon ourselves, that's what I chose to do. And the form of that came out in an eating disorder. So before cancer was even there, I was still struggling heavily with an eating disorder. I was very underweight. I was torturing my body day in and day out, see how much I could go without food, or if I was eating, then I started to develop bulimia, so it was throwing the food up. I was a star athlete for many years, and then that was taken away from me when I was brought up to varsity and then benched. So it was like loss of identity in many ways, that I had no idea who I was. When I went away to school for university in Boston, take one, I started to drink a lot. I always had a connection, and addiction is addiction in my eyes. And so when it was an eating disorder, that was one form of an addiction. Then it turned to alcohol as a different addiction, a different way to numb out the emotions and the feelings. So the addiction of alcohol started to take a higher priority and presence in my life when I started to go to college for the first time around. And I was drinking a lot, too much. It became really a problem. And I reached a point, and I had never been in that position before in my life, where I was going to fail out for the semester. And I decided to pull myself from school. And I said, Mom, I'm coming home. And that's when, didn't go over super happy, but it was what it was. And at that time I had this lump in my neck, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, started to metastasize. So finally, at some point, my mom urged me to go to the doctor, and she said, you need to get this checked out. And upon having it checked out, my pediatrician at the time, because I was still in pediatrics, she said to me, you're going to the hospital, getting a biopsy, CT scan right away. And I was like, do you want to tell me any of what is going on? She was like, you will be okay, but you need to go now, which is terrifying for somebody. It's terrifying. It's like, what does that mean? Can you give me any details? But of course not, because it's a liability. So that's when everything prior started to take a turn, right before leading up to the diagnosis.
As you were dealing with, the eating disorder and then, the alcohol part, what do you feel like you were wrestling with at that time? What was the main issue you were having with yourself, with your identity? And, because obviously those are coping mechanisms in a way, right? You're trying to control something you can't control, probably up here or in your heart, right? So what was the main issue you were wrestling with at that age?
Identity and self-acceptance, I believe. And it's a lot of what I now share and teach to others, is it's how you can be aware of who you are and be okay with that. There's a big phrase that I use a lot, and it's own your weird. And it's good to stand out. It's good to fit out and to be weird, because it's the weird that's going to make you awesome someday. And that's how I truly feel today, that it's all this stuff from the past that has been able to bring me to where I am in the present.
Isn't that amazing how, I know we're jumping a little bit, but your past, which was so like tumultuous in a way, has brought you into where you are today, and then just all the amazing things you're doing for people. But back when you were younger, you couldn't even take care of yourself almost, and now you're taking care of yourself, and that's inspiring so many other people. Which we'll get more into that in just a few moments. But so cancer never comes at a good time, right? And here you are, at 19, you've had your issues with different things, you're out of school, and then all of a sudden you start noticing lumps in your neck and everything else. And then boom, you get diagnosed with cancer. Tell us a little bit about the day you were diagnosed and how did you take that initial, notification that you had Hodgkin's lymphoma?
It's one of those moments in your life that you never forget. I think all of us who are cancer survivors can put ourselves back right in that same position. You remember every smell, every color, whatever your mind can process, every piece of that. You can recreate that story in your head in an instant. At least I can. And to this day, anytime that I smell rubbing alcohol, I still have like these goosebumps that come up on my skin because it reminds me of the injections or the saline, and it's all just a similar trajectory. When I was diagnosed, I was in Yale New Haven Hospital, based in Connecticut. And I remember sitting in this little white room. It was my brother, my mom, my dad, and then the oncologist that walked into the room. And I was sitting up on one of the tables with my legs hanging over and swinging them and just waiting for her to come in. And you kind of know, you're in that position that you know something's not 100%, but you don't know exactly what. You can't pinpoint it yet. And when she walked in and she brought the news on and said, we have run the test and we've looked over all the results and we've collectively agreed that you have Hodgkin's lymphoma. And there's a point after, like once you hear the diagnosis, for me at least, everything went numb in my body. My ears closed off. It's like a self-protective mechanism that you shut down to only take in what you can process at the moment. I think that's what I started to do. So anything from that point forward, I have no idea what the woman said. My brain was just like, this is enough. And that's all I could process at the moment. And that's when I knew that my life was going to change from that point forward. I didn't know how, I didn't know what. I didn't even at that moment have the official plan of what they were going to do, like their cocktail lineup of anything. It was just that moment that your whole life goes upside down like an hourglass.
So, once you received the news, when you started processing, when you were maybe on the ride home or the next couple of days before you started treatment, what kind of feelings were you processing now that you had another thing in your life to add to all the other stressors that you had going on?
It's a weird mechanism, or maybe helpful. I'll embrace it as helpful, but I go into a to-do list. And with cancer, I saw this, okay, I'm going to do this, 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 this. I'm going to go for my checkup. I'm going to go for my chemotherapy. I will do 8 of those. Then I'm going to go to radiation and I'm going to be on my way, good to go. It, of course, didn't go that perfectly. But what I was more so concerned about, and it's really sad reading through my old journals, because I kept journals during that time period, all of which I include journal entries in my book. I was more concerned about the eating disorder. So for me, it's just the incredible part of how an addiction and a mind can really overpower and take over really what the bigger issue at hand is. It's like, there's a part of me now looking back that wants to shake me and be almost, Sarah, do you really see what was going on? Like, bigger picture here, kid. You got bigger fish to fry over here. It's called Hodgkin's lymphoma. Yeah. Get your shit straight. But no, I was still deep in an eating disorder, and that was consuming me in every thought and every meal and I wasn't focusing on nourishing myself. I was focusing on, I can lose weight now, and it's really a sad mindset, but it was a reality.
So describe your treatment to us. What kind of treatment cycle did they put you on for Hodgkin's lymphoma?
I was on ABVD for the chemotherapy, and then it took a different twist towards the end for radiation. So I'll explain a little bit about that. The initial treatment that they had for me for chemotherapy was the ABVD, and they were going to I had a PICC line put in my right arm, and they were going to have me do the 2 series, see how it's going along the way. I reacted very well to the treatment, especially starting out, but very quickly, all of my white blood cells and healthy cells started to deplete. So at some point, I had to start giving myself Neupogen shots to increase the white blood cell count. And I know people out there in your audience know what I'm talking about, so I don't have to go into too many details about Neupogen and PIC. And sadly, it's our vocabulary, but a reality. And the treatments, of course, when your cells, you show up and you're ready to go and you've mentally prepared yourself for chemotherapy, and then they draw your bloods and they're like, sorry, you're not healthy enough to receive this today. So you almost get this like rejected, go back home, see you next week stamp on your forehead. And so that, of course, prolonged the treatment. After doing 7 to 8 rounds of the chemotherapy, it was the same, it was ABVD. I ended up getting a really bad infection. I woke up one morning and I had terrible sweat, like worse than I've ever had before in my life, even with the flu. And everything was in pain in my body. And immediately when my mom called the hospital, and they said, come in right away. And it was an infection in the PICC line. So they ended up taking the PICC line out. I was in the hospital for 3 days. And at that point, I was in between. They wanted to give me another series of chemotherapy. My oncologist did. And I looked like death. I really looked terrible. And it wasn't just from the infection. And I said, I really don't know if I will make it successfully with another, that's another 4 chemotherapy treatments. So we pushed hard, but we got a second opinion from another doctor another oncologist who was actually studying more of the European studies for chemotherapy and treatments for Hodgkin's lymphoma. And it ended up being a very empowering lesson for myself, and one that I share today of self-empowerment. Get second opinions and make a decision based on what you truly believe deep down. And it has to be intuitive, because that doctor, his study said, let's change the radiation treatment. Stop here with the 2 rounds of chemotherapy, with the 2 series of chemotherapy, and let's switch to a little more aggressive radiation treatment. But there's studies that have proven that you can be very healthy for the rest of your life by doing this. And we ended up going with that doctor because that's what I intuitively felt. My parents left the decision based ultimately up to me. They, of course, gave their input and their care for me, but ultimately it was what I wanted to choose to do. And that became a lesson of self-empowerment, and to choose based on what I need, not what a doctor's telling me. This is also the first oncologist that I had. She's the one who said, well, green tea, it's not going to help, but it probably won't hurt you. And I was like, now all the studies about how wonderful green tea is, and antioxidants and anti-cancer. So it's really to take what the doctor says, of course, but also do your own work for your own health.
Yeah, I'm real big on self-advocacy. I think that's our part in the process, is to be a self-advocate and to really do research for us. Because, lots of times when we jump on the internet, it's all about how horrible cancer is. But then when you start digging into different things, that combination of Eastern versus Western medicine is really, to me, like the sweet spot as far as what we need to do.
Certainly.
Tell us a little bit about the side effects that you had from your chemo and your radiation.
The one that I still live with today is some damage to my lungs. Maybe. They tell me I cannot go scuba diving. I, of course, am going to test that at some point. Not by any self-harm means, but because I really love being in the ocean, and it's something that I want to do. So when I can do a pulmonary function test and make sure everything is okay, and then it's one of my life goals and bucket lists. When I was going through the treatment itself, I've lost my hair, pretty much almost all of it. I never wore a wig. I was very stubborn about that. I tried them on, and I felt like it was a very weird piece of me that I didn't connect with at all. I went in and out of one wig shop, and I was like, this is not for me, Mom. I'd rather show up bald to my classes at the university than wear something that doesn't feel a part of me. And that's all a personal choice, I believe. It's not a judgment, but for me, it was really more important just to own what I was going through as a scar of strength. The vincristine itself caused a lot of pain in my jaw. And it's ABVD, the diablaspheme. caused some of the pain in my joints. I think that was, and the taste, of course, taste was a little off. But when you have an eating disorder, it kind of works to your advantage. So it wasn't really a wonderful combo.
So if you could paint a picture to the audience, like what was your like height and weight at that point when you were at your lowest, say going through chemo and eating disorder at the same time?
I was 5'6.5" and probably 110. 110. I don't talk a lot about numbers because of my eating disorder past, but with the chemotherapy, I think it was about 110. And I have some very thin photos of me. I also wasn't working out that much. The irony today is that I'm super healthy. I eat 4 meals, a lot of food. But I'm not too far. I'm a little taller. And I'm not too far from the weight, but it's a lot of muscle mass. So it's amazing when you take care of your body just does its thing.
Yeah,
it works to find a balance. But yeah, I looked sick. I looked sick in many different ways. Right.
Fit and thin is one look, but malnourished and thin is another look for sure.
Yes.
What would you say, and I know you probably had several of these like we all do, but if you could pick one or maybe two, what was one or two of your lowest moments that you had during that time when you were diagnosed, going through treatment, and even in your recovery?
There's a point in my book, and I'm getting goosebumps as I think of this. There's a point in my book, and I describe this in great detail. I was in the hospital when I was getting the PICC line removed, and I had the IV strapped to my arm that was now pumping it was vitamin K and potassium to get my fluids back up from the infection. And I was stuck in the hospital. I hated staying in the hospitals. I never did any inpatient for either eating disorder or for cancer. This was my first time. And it was the overnight, I think like day 2. And I wanted to get out. But I started to take the IV pole in my hand, walking down the hallway, going to where they had like a little cafeteria with snacks and everything. And I just grabbed whatever food I could, eating it, grabbing any snacks I had in the room, eating it, and then take myself to the bathroom, and I'm throwing up in the bathroom with an IV in my arm. I remember the pain when I would bend my arm because it was right in my elbow, trying to throw up because that was my eating disorder taking over, even the idea that I had an infection and that I was in the hospital from the infection and the cancer. So that was probably one of my lowest moments because I remember thinking even in that moment, like, this is really sad, Sarah. This is really sad that this is how you're dealing with all of this. As far as the cancer part goes, I think I had more triumphs along the way than I had low points though. Mm-hmm. So that to me is a very standout because it was a combination of the two.
Right. So we all have those moments where when we look back on them, they're probably, you almost don't identify with that person at that time because you're so far past that point now. But it's always a good reminder of where you've been and where you've came from and where you are now. Let's talk about your road to recovery a little bit because, at this point you have the infection, you're going through the cancer treatment. When did you start really addressing and recovering and processing the eating disorder? Was it once you finished treatment, or was it kind of at the same time as you were, you got off of your chemo and your radiation after that point? What was it during, or was it after when you started healing from the cancer that you started healing from the eating disorder as well?
It was way after. Right after cancer, it was more of a post-traumatic stress after cancer, thinking, what do I do now? I think that there lacks a proper follow-up care for survivorship. And if I can add something in some way to other survivors' paths, there's almost this empty blank slate and page. You don't know what to do next.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I write about this in my book, there's this buzz going on around you for so long, and doctors, and you have this schedule, and then all of a sudden, you still have your follow-ups, but other than that, you're supposed to walk back out in the world like a normal human being with a bald head? It's like, it just doesn't go that way. So for me, the after was this shock of what do I do now? And also this feeling of pressure that I needed to achieve something incredible and profound because I survived cancer and not everybody gets this chance.
Right.
I need to do something well worthwhile. So I felt this other impending pressure. I healed years later, I want to say 10 years later, from an eating disorder when I started to, I'll say 8 years later, when I started to practice yoga. And I started to move in a way that connected my body with my mind. The irony is when I was going through treatment, the nurse suggested I do yoga. And I was like, that's silly. Yoga is just stretchy stuff. And I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to burn my calories. So it's kind of never say never and watch where you shove your foot in your mouth. I started to practice yoga and I really started to appreciate what my body could do. The cancer part showed me strength, and overcoming cancer showed me that I was strong and then I could go through some really hard shit and come out on the other side and find a light. But then to really push past the alcoholism and also an eating disorder, that was probably my hardest feat in my life so far. When you say to people that you have overcome cancer, it's like a badge of pride in a lot of ways.
Right.
You say, I've overcome being an alcoholic, people can connect with that still. But when you say I've overcome an eating disorder, it's still almost a taboo in a lot of ways. And there's no one applauds you for throwing up your meal. People will applaud you for, either losing weight or for overcoming cancer or for kicking, an addiction or a habit. So for me, the combination of all three of those was this powerhouse that I knew afterwards I had to really share this message with anybody who's looking to overcome a hardship, to know that no matter the level of it, you can come out on top. So to wrap up and go back to a long answer to your one question, it was really years later that I started to learn how awesome my body was, and I wanted to start taking care of it.
A lot of people I speak to on the show, they're either in their battle or they're surviving cancer, or even caregivers as well too. And it is a badge of honor to survive cancer because it's not necessarily something we did to earn that right. Sometimes you can do everything that you possibly can and still the cancer doesn't go away or it comes back, right? That's in a lot of ways that's out of our controls and in some sense. We can do things to help, I think, but sometimes, you can do everything and it still doesn't go away or it comes back. But, the fact that you survived cancer and then now you add two other things on top of that, for me, I always feel like the more crazy bad things, I would say bad, the more struggles and stuff that we have in life, that just opens us up to a pocket of people we would have no way to connect with without that personal experience. And whether it's divorce or whether it's cancer or whether it's an eating disorder or some other thing that we have, now you're personally connected to a whole new community that I feel like once you make it on the other end, it's our duty in a way to share with other people how they can get from that one end to the other. Because when we're at our lowest point, a lot of us, either we don't want to learn or we don't want to know, or we don't know how to do it. And I think, people like you being able to speak to all these different communities and then how you speak to them is obviously great. But just the fact that you have enough courage, enough vulnerability to go into these people's, site with your videos and with your book and with everything else that you have going on, I think it's just you answering that call of responsibility that you have to be such a great storyteller, because storytelling is part of the healing process as well too. But I'm sure every time that you share your story, there's maybe like 1 ounce of you that feels more comfortable with everything that's happened in the past. And because guilt is a thing that we all struggle with as well too, from past situations and stuff. But it's continuing to heal you all along the way, and you're providing healing to someone else. You're getting healed. And I know whenever I get comments about, this has helped me so much and all the accolades people try to give you for what you're doing, it feels good. But for me, like, I'm so grateful that person had that moment of clarity or hope or inspiration to really get them through that tough time, because we all do this life together, no matter how many things that are out there to try to separate us. Your message, and which I love, is, we're all in this thing together, and we can all help each other out if we do our own part. And as we, go through things together, we're not, separated by our beliefs or ideas when we all focus on, our responsibility and what's important to really help others along. And, I feel like gratitude is the key to happiness in a lot of ways. And I know you're super grateful for all the things that you've went through, but it probably took a decent amount of time to really look back and see all the bad things that have happened, like how grateful you are that you're on the other end now. And now you get an opportunity to share that. A question I like to ask people is, what's the best thing that cancer's done for you? And I know that's an interesting way to put it, but in your answer, what would you say?
There's a video that I recently posted on my YouTube, and it was "Cancer is a Gift." And I truly believe that for many reasons, but I'll just number back on one. And it's taught me to leap and to just do, and to live without regrets, to not settle, to focus on quality, to follow your passion, your heart. It's taught me the impermanence of life for all of us. And, it's part of the reason that I don't wake up and I don't fear cancer coming back, because honestly, I live in Miami and people drive like crap here. So I have just as much of a chance of getting hit by a stupid driver here that I do of having cancer reoccurrence. What I have control over is to look both ways before I cross the street. And I have control over taking the best care of my mind, my body, what I'm nourishing it with, that I'm happy with what I'm doing. I'm in great relationships. Those are things that I can control. And those are all things that cancer had to teach me. I had to learn that from the idea that this can be taken away from me, this precious thing of life, but I can also do my best to take care of it. And that's really what I'm learning here along the way.
I always feel like our life, we're all a piece of mosaic art, in my opinion. We're all a bunch of random pieces put together. And when you put them all together and shine light on it, that's typically the way you can see mosaics in their most beautiful way. And that's the way I look at, my life. And that's the way I see your life as well, too. It's all these broken pieces, but when it's all put together and then you shine light on it by really putting yourself out there, it really shows how beautiful your life is. And so many people can get inspiration from that. So let's talk about what you do now. Now that everyone knows you and knows the in and outs of your story and your life, let's talk a little bit about what you do now. How did you get inspired to start Live Free Warrior?
So now that you all know that I am no angel, that I don't just eat lettuce every day, I was inspired to take on the phrase Live Free Warrior. That was probably 10 years ago. And it was about finding that freedom that I just talked about that cancer gave me. It was the idea to live this best life, to empower myself, to learn what I need to live exactly as I desire. And if I can change something, I'm going to do it. If I can't, then learn how to accept it and make this inner peace. The warrior part, like I said from the beginning, it's some things are worth fighting for. And I have no problem. Ask anybody close in my life, my husband to my mother, I will fight till the death if I know something's worth it. At the same time, part of being a warrior is knowing when to preserve your energy. And there are some battles out there that they're just not for me. Politics are one of them. It's just like I pick and choose my battles, and it's really certain things that I will bring up and I will fight hard for. The Live Free Warrior is exactly that. When you feel so passionate about something, or you really want something, you do whatever it takes to make that part of your life happen. And for me, that was finding health. That was discovering health and finding a way to incorporate that every day. So parts of what I do every day now that make up my life, I move every day, be it travel, be it fitness, be it yoga, be it walking. I eat well. I eat things that nourish me, that give me energy. I'm blessed and thankful to have overcome the eating disorder, that it's now I eat food that gives me the energy I want. I eat very healthy, but it's because it's what tastes good. It's because it's what's going to give me the nourishment I want, that it's not going to leave me with a stomach ache. I have people on Instagram write me sometimes, they're like, don't you just live a little sometimes? And I was like, this is living for me. This is living. I'll have a drink every now and then, and I'm really cool with that. But at the same time, I'm not going to drink 10, and I'm not going to just eat chocolate cake because there's chocolate cake there, and that's living to some people. I'm living life on my own terms and my own rules, and nobody else's. Creating a lifestyle, not a diet. And the biggest part is, of all the deepest cancers, was for me to own my weird and to self-accept who I am.
I love that. Own my own weird. So let's talk about
there's t-shirts coming out too.
Is there? I'm about to get one. Let's talk about your book that came out on December the 1st called Living Cancer Free. If you could give us like a snapshot of what that's about and tell us where we can find that.
Certainly. So if you rewind back to the beginning of this podcast, the first, I would say, half hour of it is part 1. And I go into a lot more detail specifically of everything from age 14 up until the overcoming the cancer portion. Part 2 of the book is after cancer, all the way up until just about present day last year. So it goes through all of the struggle of who I was at 14, dating a lesbian, going through alcoholism and eating disorder, cancer, moving states, changing jobs, getting a divorce, being laid off, remarrying, changing jobs again, to where I am today. It's only 288 pages, so I know it sounds like a lot in 35 years of my life, but it's 288 pages total. And then the third part of the book is a workbook. So it's 52 tips and tricks that I used in my life to detox, not food, but detox your social media, detox your inbox, ways to live free. The other part is it incorporates, so the third part of the workbook, to break it down further, is 4 different chapters. One is to detox your life. The other is to nourish your life. The other, chapter 11, is to create connection between mind and body. And then the 4th is to live free based on the manifesto that I created, which are the core values that I live my life on today. One of which, never settle. The other, quality over quantity. And that you can create any life that you desire to live. So that's that in a nutshell of the book. I think it's great to share a story and to uncover a problem, but I think it's more powerful to offer a solution for people who are trying to connect. So that's why it was important for me to combine both my autobiography with the workbook in one.
I absolutely love that. A lot of people read for entertainment, and it's great. It's great to hear a great story, but if there's no action inspired behind it, there's no growth.
Exactly.
So I know we can go to your website, livefreewarrior.com, to check out that. And also your book's available on Amazon as well, too, if people want to purchase that. I'll be sure to drop the links to your website and the Amazon link as well in the show notes, and people can go check those out. If people want to connect with you, I know you're on Instagram and YouTube. What's your handle people can connect with?
You ready for this one? It's Live Free Warrior. On all channels across the board.
Perfect. Well, Sara, before we go, I want to acknowledge you for something real quick. I enjoy getting to know people. And for people that don't know, this is Sara and I's first conversation that we've had. We talked on email several times. This is our first somewhat face-to-face conversation. And I knew from the beginning that I would connect with you just based off all of your content. And, so I want to acknowledge you by saying it's the very fact that you are so truthful with all the ugly things that we deem in life, and you're so transparent with that, makes you super authentic and real. And there's no wonder so many people can connect with you because of that. So that's something that if you have a moment to take, a brief moment to congratulate yourself, that's something you should do with that, because lots of times, and I know you'll know what I'm talking about, when you look in the mirror, you can see a completely different person than who you really are. And it's really easy to believe that lie. And so many people live that lie every day, whether it's living the life of who you think you should be or who you want to be versus who you really are. And the fact that you can be so public with all the things that you've said and done and decisions you've made, I really think that is what's more needed in our lives today, because social media is great. I love social media, but it can be like the ugly side of the internet in a lot of ways, because it can be super fake, right? So the very fact that you're so transparent with everything is even more beautiful than anything that you could ever do, probably, or any picture you could ever post, is how you live your life every day. And it's one thing to tell someone how to live their life, but when you actually practice what you're living, for me, like, my faith is very important, and I could tell people about it all day long, but if I'm not living that lifestyle, then it's super fake. So you actually live the lifestyle that you promote, the brand that you promote. And, I just think you should feel super proud of yourself for that. If you have a moment, I'm not big on always feeling a ton of pride, because that can get you in a lot of trouble too, but you should take moments to really, be thankful for what you have and who you are, because you're such a wonderful person. And being able to share that, with all our listeners today, and then all the people that you're connected to, is a phenomenal thing. So
thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody else hasn't told you thank you, then I will tell you, for everyone listening today, thank you for what you've done. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Like I said, I'll drop all the links to the book. I know you have something coming out too, a 28-day thing coming out pretty soon as well.
Yes, it's a 28-day Live Free Renew program. So it incorporates a lot of the exercises that are in the workbook part of my book, but it breaks it down in a 4-week period. We do daily movement, we do daily meditation. There's mini goals that we set for each day in a theme. There'll be also superfood recipes to incorporate into your day. It's a Renew program that has nothing to do with diets and taking things out of your life. It's all about what you can add in, because sometimes we don't need to restart. We just need a little renew. Love that. When will that be coming out? The first program itself is going to be in June. It'll be June 1, give or take. Well, good. Well, whenever that comes out, I'll be the first to post it for everyone, so they can follow up with that for you as well too. Thank you. Sara, again, thank you for being a wonderful guest, and we will be in touch with you soon, okay? Thank you so much. Thank you all for listening in. I look forward to hearing your DMs, emails, messages very soon.
We appreciate you spending time with us on today's episode and encourage you to continue the conversation to help you keep pushing forward. For more resources based on today's episode, as well as ways to recommend a guest and connect to Truett personally, head over to 1%podcast.com. Be sure to join us next time for more stories of inspiration right here with Truett Taylor on the 1% Podcast.